Hi, I'm Sarah from MVMT, and today's Nordic Walking Teaching tip is called Transitions Part 2. Not quite the revenge, but it follows on from an earlier video I did which looked at pole planting in terms of timing. We looked at 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, and how we can build that into a drill with people we walk with, for our own personal development in terms of transitioning between those. So this is really building on that, and we're going to look at those transitions between different types of pole planting, but then we're going to take it on to look at how I've adapted that to deal with the terrain that I'm out in most days, which is the Peak District. And sometimes it's hilly, sometimes it's trail, sometimes there's a big rock in the middle, and how I've sort of developed the Nordic walking style so I can keep fluidity and I can keep moving over terrain at a speed that I feel comfortable with. So instead of stopping, instead of sort of holding my poles and bunching up when I come to something a little bit more technical, how I've managed to adapt the styles and the pole plants to deal with that, to keep fluidity. And for me, I come from a ski background. I've skied since I was 3, and my passion was and is, when I can, moguls. And I think of moving at pace over terrain, keeping a rhythm, very much as skiing moguls. So if any of your skiers out there, you might be able to relate to that as well. So let's have a little look at transitioning between different pole planting techniques that we can use. So we'll start with what I called 2 time, which is our Nordic walking technique. Alternate arms, alternate legs working in our 2 time. And then I might move to 1 time. Perhaps there's a rock coming up on my right hand side and I'm going to want to hold while I keep planting. So I just hold this right hand pole and keep going with my left. So if you imagine that rock's on this right hand side and I'm avoiding it by holding the pole. And then move back into your stride. So that transition between single pole plant to double, super useful. Can't stress enough when there's loads of ferns around and you're trying to avoid them, how useful that is. So let's have a little look at it at pace, because it's such a good drill that you can practice to give confidence at keeping moving at a speed that you're comfortable with. Here we go. All I do is hold the pole when I come to something that's a little bit of an obstruction, but super useful. So I call it the hold. Nothing more complicated than that, but hopefully it gives you a little taster of how you can move and keep moving when there's things coming up that you might not want to plant on. If there's a big rock, I'm not going to necessarily want to plant on it, but I can just hold and keep going with the same pace that I set. So really love that, the hold of the pole to keep yourself moving at rhythm. But you've got to look ahead, you've got to see what's coming up, you've got to look down, up, and keep aware of your surroundings and thinking ahead. Great for your head, takes a lot of concentration. And the other thing you can do is if you pass a little bit scrubby either side, you might actually want to take your arms out a bit wider. We covered narrow and wide. You might want to take them wider. Sometimes I take my arms wider, bring it back in, but I keep going. I just keep that movement going and play around with this terrain. Don't be afraid to use these pole planting techniques to deal with the terrain that you are walking through. I talk a lot about people I teach about making the poles, the Nordic walking poles, feel like an extension of you, feel like they're a natural thing to use when you're out and about walking or running, however you're using them. And I think that's really important, and that's mileage practice, going out, but those transition drills and getting used to using those different pole plants in different parts of terrain are really useful. Can't tell you how useful they are. So go and practice transitions, move it onto to real life terrain, not on the flat, when you feel ready to progress to that. Practice on the flat, practice somewhere where you can get used to it and feel confident, and then maybe take it up a notch into terrain where it's a little bit more technical and see how it plays out. Any questions, drop me a note. but enjoy.